Great. Welcome everyone to our usual weekly virtual interim. I'll jump right into it. Once I figure out the right button. This is the note. Well, I think we all seen it by now, but again, this covers intellectual property concerns and a code of conduct. If you've not been to many IETF meetings, feel free to read through this. You can just put in your search engine IETF note well, and it will come right up. As always, we are going to use Google. You guys have already figured out that we're doing this in Google Meet. However, chat will remain in Meet Echo. For queuing, please just raise your hand, and this has a fairly good utility to keep the order of who raised their hands in Meet, so we're just going to use that. This is the agenda today. As usual, we're just going to hand it off to Ian as the document editor to talk about the issues he wants to talk about. Would anyone like to bash the agenda at this time?
So maybe I'm not sure exactly what I want to say, but we maybe just want to talk about the actual interim, which is upcoming.
Right. Yeah. So I'll do it. So we are meeting in person in 2 weeks. So of course there will be no virtual interim on the 19th of June because we'll be here from the 17th to the 19th. If you've not, I sent an email to the list recently, I think yesterday, of all the people I have as attending in person. If you are not on that list and you plan to attend in person, please send MOQ-chairs an email indicating clearly which days you plan to attend and your affiliation, just so I can get that on the badge. And then I can make sure that both Cisco and Google, who are two hosts, have that information. I remind you that Monday is an interop day, so some of you may find, which often has side discussions, and so you may find that interesting and others may not. And Wednesday is a national holiday here in the United States. It is Juneteenth, but for various reasons, we are going to plow on and do a meeting on that day. Furthermore, as always, Alan and I invite you to provide feedback about these virtual interims. It's an experiment we've been running for, I guess, 3 weeks or so now, 4 weeks. And I will soon have to, my current plan is to go ahead and schedule another interim for June 26th, which I need to do in the next few days here, which is the week after the in-person meeting. And if you think that's a terrible idea for some reason, or would like to see a big course change, the time to say so would be soon. So send us a note at MOQ-chairs. We have a scribe. Thank you, Luke, for volunteering before we got started here. Alan was on the hook for a while, and that's not really sustainable. So I invite you to, those of you who are maybe not Ian and the editor and in the middle of everything, to maybe find an opportunity to do the community solid and take minutes. One of the advantages of doing this as a formal interim is we actually have a record of what we talk about rather than just informal discussions in a editor's meeting. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Ian, and I will unshare.
Excellent. Thank you.
Take it away.
So I actually made a few slides per Alan's suggestion. And I'm hoping that we can get through the remaining questions on max cache duration. But I don't know. We'll see. I tried to clarify some things in the PR, but let's maybe talk through it. And then I'm hoping, at least if my intent is clear, then I can work on translating that into text that says the thing I want it to say. Okay, let me go to slides. Percent. Go. And I'll share the slides publicly afterwards. Sorry, I just was working on them this morning. Start slideshow. How clever. Cool. Okay, so this PR has been out for a while. The core goal is to solve issues, I think, mostly around kind of caching and cache hints. So, the idea is content like this content that we're viewing right now, you would not want to stick in your cache for a long period of time. Other pieces of content you might be willing to cache for quite a bit longer. And so in some sense, this is an optimization, but it is an optimization that is potentially critical for many real world applications, because if every single Google Meet chat on the face of the planet was cached, at every single relay, that would be an awful lot of data that would probably never be requested ever again. So it is, I think there's a clear set of use cases in my opinion. I'm welcome to debate that if people want, but yeah. So I think so the idea is that there's a max cache duration in the stream header. There is a question about exactly when kind of does the time start. And so my proposal is that basically it starts when you get the entire kind of stream content. And that's partially just due to the nature of it being in the stream header. Like that's sort of the unit of atomic delivery by the nature of the object model. So for an object, it starts, our object per stream or datagram, when the complete object arrives, with its group, its complete group arrives. Track is a little weird. I guess it's when the complete subscription arrives. I don't have a strong preference on that. That seems, I had a difficult time like reasoning through. I don't think there's any other approach I can think of that makes more sense, but it certainly is a little bit of a weirder use case. Track per stream is sort of weird anyway in a whole number of ways, which I'll talk about in a moment. So some of the thought process behind this is the publisher ideally placed objects on a stream. If they did place multiple objects on a stream because of some sort of strict dependency that they wanted enforced, i.e. you had an iframe followed by a bunch of p frames, so there's no point in delivering the later objects if you don't have the earlier objects, right? Like, so they're generally the stream is being used as a feature, not a bug. The other reason,
can you say more about complete subscription arrives? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Is that like the whole track, the end of the track message has been delivered, like the whole track has been delivered? I mean, that's fine with me. I just don't quite understand what.
All right, so this is why it's so yes. I don't think it can be the whole track because one can potentially subscribe to a subset of the track, right? So you subscribe to the first half of it. So it can't really be the whole track. It just has to be the complete subscription, I guess. Again, it is weird.
I totally get what you're saying now. Like if you specified it an end to your subscription, it's when you get to that end, not when you get to the end of the track. I understand what you mean now.
Like, yeah, I mean, I couldn't figure out any other plausible definition, but again, it's weird.
And so Ian, that would also apply to group per stream then. If I have a partial subscription to like half the objects in the group, this would apply to the end of the subscription, not the group.
Yeah, and that feels less weird to me, right? Because at least you can presumably use the beginning part of the group even if you don't have the end part. So like that, I don't know, at least to me, like that seems less concerning. But anyway, that's me. The other thing I wanted to point out, you can only convey a single max cache duration on a per stream level. So like to the next hop. So if you were trying to track this sort of TTL cache duration concept on any finer grained than sort of the stream boundary, you wouldn't actually have a way to convey that information that you were trying to track to the next hop anyway. And so it would kind of be pointless. Additionally, there's the whole thing of like, would you ever want the first object in a stream to expire before the second object if the first thing's the iframe and the second thing's I mean, all these things kind of become silly. So this is sort of where I'm ending up in terms of like what is an actually practical solution to how the timer should work. Do people have thoughts on this? Is this sensible? I did have one other issue with the PR that I don't think people pointed out, but I want to get resolved as well, ideally. Or do people think this seems sensible now that I've walked through it verbally and it's just the PR is confusing? Okay. Oh, Mike.
Yeah, I have a hard time commenting on the specifics of any of these proposals because I feel like there's maybe a larger question left unaddressed, which is kind of the distinction between behavior expectations for subscribers at the live edge or near the live edge and the expected behavior of relays for very late subscribers. And I think that this kind of calls into question the overall approach of having timeouts, because we're talking about potentially having an impact on what subscribers receive, depending on what's in cache, right? And that's I have questions about that.
That's a good question. I would like, hopefully, to make this separate from the delivery timeout PR that Victor put up that we discussed before. Like I have the concern you have. I understand that concern. I think using this for that purpose, the delivery purpose, is probably like kind of overloading the functionality, but I could go other way. So, yeah, good concern. Suas.
More of a clarification question. So, just talking about real-time use cases, like let's say we want to expire the object every 500 milliseconds. It's just as an example. So when I'm using group per stream or track per stream, and you're going hop by hop, the thing that we put in the header, is it aggregate number, or is and one number that is applied equally to all the objects? The duration of the group times 500 milliseconds, or is it more like 500 milliseconds and that applies to each object?
Sorry, what was the second? 500 milliseconds.
Like we're basically saying when you go from hop to hop, and the stream header carries that max cache duration of 500 milliseconds, would that mean that each object expires in 500 milliseconds from now? Is that?
It would mean that the entire stream's content and all the objects in it would expire 500 milliseconds from now.
Okay, so then it's a stream cache duration. It's not object cache duration then.
I mean, it's the data. Yes, I mean we have this kind of multi-level data model.
I'm just trying to basically understand, as a publisher, when you are trying to set a cache duration as an original application, at its level, it's thinking about these are my objects, and this is what I want the relay network to expire the object in some point in time. And when we do stream per group or stream per track or stream per object, or like they need to basically set it differently, right? Based on, you should know the size of your group to say, or size of your subscription to say, my subscription should expire in X milliseconds from now. It's not per object anymore.
Right. Yeah, I mean that is very true. Like the nature of this mechanism is on the granularity of the forwarding preference.
Good.
Yep.
Thanks.
So now I think it's Victor next. Let me look up my queue. Yeah. Go for it, Victor. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I kind of want to understand better is for this specific mechanism. So from what I understand, the purpose is to make sure that we do not overcache things. But for that specific purpose, why do we really want this to be in stream header as opposed to subscription global? Because from what I understand and what I can imagine, you typically, like, I'm not sure I fully understand the case in which you would want to change this fully. So, and like putting this per stream is, well, per stream is kind of fine, but like per datagram is kind of excessive to me.
And that'd be along the lines of your PR 448. Is that correct? I can throw it in the chat for people who haven't seen it. Is that correct, Victor?
Could you repeat the question?
That's all. Like 448, your PR that you wrote would be an alternative that would be on the subscription granularity.
Well, it's hard to say if it's an alternative because, like, 448 and like I had some use cases in mind that it's not entirely clear to me 100% what the relationship to this is, because I think those are related use cases, but
Okay. Mo.
Yeah, similar to Mike, I'm concerned about the interplay with this and other mechanisms. Like, although this is trying to say it's talking about caching, the actual text in the PR says relay must not send. So it's, to me, the same as the delivery timeout that Victor was proposing in a separate PR. I don't see how we could talk about one or the other without addressing both together and figure out what is the use case for prohibiting or hinting about caching and prohibiting or hinting about delivery.
Yeah, I agree. The text, I mean, the text was originally written, I think, before the delivery timeout one was written, so it's possible it should be rephrased, but I'm not sure. Colin, I'll let you go.
Okay, so I was going to just sort of address the two different things on this. One was the directionality of this being publisher indicated or subscriber indicated. With the subscriber indicated ones, I never understand how they flow upstream other than the very final edge. And the other thing is, I think, my view of this is on all of our CDNs today in the model, almost like every one of our use cases for this is a publisher pays model. And therefore, the publisher is the one that needs to have some influence on the control of this. It's the same app, I'm not saying like the end app on the other side isn't aware of that, but that's where I sort of favor at least having a limit that the publisher can set on publishing on this stuff. The other thing I was going to say, I think this was getting a little bit to what Suhas was saying. So I'm on the, we need at least one option that is publisher side of this, limiting this. I feel very strongly about that. This next one is about a difference between sort of what some of the things we had before and talked about before in this. And this is whether you, let's say we're doing stream per group. That's probably one of our most common use cases here. And we're doing video on that. The amount that we're going to put in the caches would vary very differently. If, let's say we are never going to deal with data that's more than 500 milliseconds old. Like if that data is, if we're beyond that, we're just going to close down the connection type thing. Okay, that's many use cases are in that category. And so you never want things cached more. There's no point in caching an object more than 500 milliseconds. But we're using a longer GOP sequence than that, like 10, 15, let's say a 10-second GOP sequence. As you can, this would, like if we don't expire any of those objects until the end of the 10 seconds and then we expire them all, the application will still work fine, but we'll have a lot more data in the cache than if we expired the objects as they went along at 500 milliseconds. It does complicate the issue. It's like, well, what happens if you get an object, when the first object expires, do you delete the whole stream? No, not if you've managed to catch up. But if the stream ever gets behind, you delete it. So it would get more complicated to explain how that solution works than this. And the only gain to it wouldn't be application functionality. The only gain to it would be significantly reduced cache sizes for these places where your expiry time is far shorter than your group time length. And whether we should care about that or not, I'm sort of on the fence. I haven't really quite decided, but does that make sense? Sort of yeah, okay.
Yep, that is exactly the trade-off, and I think yes, you've described it very well. I think it's purely are you using some extra memory, which I think most of the time is probably not a big deal, and maybe it's actually a feature because it's convenient to be able to start at whatever the current group that is available is.
I mean, what I just described of expiring before that would mean if you were 10 seconds into or you're 5 seconds into a 10-second GOP sequence, you wouldn't be able to start, right? It would be gone.
Which would be sort of a bummer.
So, yeah. So, I mean, I get it. And it's just a slight optimization. The other thing to it just seems like the simpler solution is definitely what you have right now.
Yep.
Expire the complex. And like, maybe we should start with simpler until proven we need something more complex. So, I sort of lean towards the direction you have it. Yeah.
Thanks. Victor.
I think weren't there. Oh, okay. I think I'm in the queue. I do agree with Collins that there are use cases in which we're kind of fine not to, like, we have like a low latency video stream, but our groups are extremely long, and so, but like it's fine in the like immediate scenario because everyone is caught up. My main, I guess one thing I do not like, it is, okay, let me think about this more. I forgot what I was about to say. Well, listen, good.
Okay. Mike, I do, at some point I want to pause and go to the next slide for a moment because I think it's an interesting question, and then maybe we can come back. I don't know if we want to do that now or Mike, your call.
My comment is more general, so it could wait until after.
Yeah. Why don't I insert the idea of the next slide into your mind, and then you can pontificate, Mike. What if things arrive out of order? So if group 2 arrives before group 1 and they have the same TTL, do you actually expire group 2 first? Seems weird. Also applies to delivery timeout. I honestly don't know what to say about this off the top of my head, but I think I'd like an answer to this at some point, because anyway. Okay, Mike, go for it.
Yeah. So I guess my comment is, again, coming back to the idea that I feel like we're not describing caching behavior here. We're continuing to talk about delivery expectations, and even in what Cullen is, getting at, where the incentives are publishers paying for relays to do things. Publishers aren't paying for cache residency. Publishers are paying for delivery. In most cases, publishers sometimes pay for storage, right? But that's a different model than cache residency at the edge, typically. Publishers sometimes pay for performance of the edge, which implies cache residency, but again, not exactly the same thing. And again, we're dealing with content that should be immutable. So a lot of what we're talking about when we say cache here isn't caching so much as our expectations for delivery. And I think that it would really clarify things if we could get away from talking about this as caching behavior and start to talk about it as delivery expectations. Because I think so long as we're talking about caching behavior, we're in the land of like, we can hint, like it's maybe useful for publishers to hint like, hey, I'm kind of expecting this, do with this information what you want. But that's at the level of, mays, not shoulds and musts in my mind.
Luke, go for it.
Just going to throw a curveball idea in here. A lot of the time we were talking about the cache size, how it relates to distance from the live edge, right? Like especially in VOD, if you download old content, we don't want to cache it too long because it's been too long since the live edge. There might be a world where we can actually specify something as crude as like the maximum number of groups a track can have subscribed, or time for, obviously time is better than group size. Because I do think we're trying to do that by having the age be on a per object basis, so we can subtract the age it's been since the latest. But we could literally just say 1,000 groups in the cache for this track. That's it. And then you also deal with out of order stuff. I would like to make it based on timestamps ideally, but maybe it does solve a lot of this complexity too.
It's a very interesting idea. I agree that does solve my out of order problem, or at least I know how to solve that out of order problem now that you said that. So, Inception, aka
yeah, that's me. Yeah, just in response to Colin's thing, I think this is a max cache duration, and I think it's specifically meant to communicate like publisher constraints, which might be contractual, or maybe it just knows something about the track that is like a superset of all the other constraints. But if there's memory pressure, the cache can always like eject this thing early, right? If it knows through like subscriber feedback that like, nobody is holding a buffer more than 500 milliseconds, and so like that's the time to jettison it, could jettison it early. That's all fine. And if it has to, it can go back and get the data again. But this is like, I think we should really, like, this is designed to communicate one kind of constraint, and there are other constraints, and we shouldn't let this mission creep into other things that other mechanisms are going to communicate.
Colin, back to you.
I was just going to address back to the you know, what the question about one group time, you know, getting your groups in the wrong order and then timing them out in the wrong order, you know, seeming weird. I just don't think we should let that bother us in the slightest at the mock level. That's fine. And I think that's going to happen all the time on audio when you're sending every audio packet as its own datagram in a new group. Yeah, all the time, you know, you're going to occasionally probably get the case where one of the, you know, two of them arrive slightly out of order, but that doesn't matter. The whole functionality and the timeouts and everything just still work fine. And the reason why I think we should just go completely generic like that and not worry about it at the mock level, I mean, the application can still deal with it, or at the mock transport level, is when we start dealing with non-audio and video tracks like the catalog tracks and other things like that, we might have cases where we explicitly want to be able to do that type of stuff. So I think we should just having simple semantics that, like, you know, this timeout applies to this group in the way you described or whatever, and just not worry about the edge cases of, hey, it's weird if one of those arrives, if group A, if group 2 arrives before group 1, that's weird. Who cares? It's fine. I don't see that breaking any use case. So let's not bother trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist and reduces flexibility.
Thanks. I think that's a reasonable. I will point out that, I mean, you'd expect reordering to be on the order of an RTT in the absolute worst case.
Sure.
And so, you know, if you're trying to like tune this max cache duration to the point where you're like within 20 milliseconds or something, you're probably like cutting it a bit close, right? Anyway,
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
Mo.
Yeah.
The time, I think, is a problem when you attach it to something that requires getting the end of an object or the end of a stream or an end of an entire subscription. Because at least in the tail drop case that people keep bringing up, they want to be able to tail drop old data. That means you'll never get the end. And so that means you'll never get the signal to start your max cache duration timer. That doesn't make any sense to me. I think it's a broken mechanism if we think there is going to be a mechanism like tail drop active on a lot of streams. So I don't think we can tie this to the end of things if we don't expect the end of things to arrive.
Yeah, I agree. I think probably that needs to be restated, that like the entire, all of the data for the group that you're going to get has arrived. And because that problem also applies to the case where you stop your subscription halfway through a group. In that case, you will also not get an end of group indicator. So I think that's a matter of probably writing the text properly to make that clear. But I agree that like we can't depend on the end of group indicator itself or alone for this mechanism. Yeah. To us.
On the catching, I'm thinking a bit more about it. The main reason why we have stream per group is a sync point, and we would like someone coming in between a group of say 30 seconds or 5 seconds should be able to kind of catch up from the beginning of the group. And the current proposal where we are saying this, the order time that we specify is for the duration of the group or something equivalent to that one, would help in like anyone who joining in middle of the call to do two things. One, get their pipe up with, even though some of the data might be coming at the network speed or whatever, it'll let the condition control assess the throughput and other things by the time your next group starts, and you'll be ready to either do click play or get ready for the next group. And hence, current proposal kind of seems to be fine with that proposal. And also, I do agree that if entire groups come out of order, then something is already going bad, because the groups are not like 33 milliseconds, right? It's like it's in order of seconds, and handling that case the way you have written right now is generic. That should be enough, and we should not be too much worried about it, especially for the video use cases.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Maybe I was overly concerned about it. Victor.
Yeah, so I have a few things to say. So regarding to the thing Colin mentioned about delivery timeouts, not like if they're controlled to subscriber, how do they propagate downstream? And I think the answer I had last time is this is generally not necessary, since most of the hops, like the most of the time you really want to do this is at the end hops, and this means like and on those hops, when you're the subscriber and you receive stuff, you need to, like, you can specify the timeout, and if you're the publisher, you can enact the timeout locally without telling anyone, since you're the one sending. So another thing I wanted to point out that I think makes sense to me and kind of was underpinning like why we want something like delivery timeout is so generally so far, well, some of us relied on the idea that you have priorities, and priorities kind of tell you, like, solves this problem of sending only the most relevant data. And in like theoretical scenario where you have all data beforehand and can always pick what you send, that's true. And kind of like long latency live video is very similar to that. But one of the reasons I believe delivery timeout is valuable is so in like, if you have all of the data, you can always order it by priority and send the highest priority. But the problem with priorities is the priorities can only tell you between choice between sending A and sending B, but they cannot tell you the choice between sending A and not sending anything, in the hope that the publisher will publish something more useful. And like there was a hiccup on the like you getting data in, and that is like it just becomes much more important the lower your latency budget is. And I believe this is like one of the main reasons why this is like delivery timeout is an important addition to priorities in terms of how we deliver things. Now, regarding the out of order problem, I think we had an interesting idea at the last interim. And that's one way we could define it is timeout for group N starts when group N plus 1 is being received. And I'm sorry, timeout for groups 1 through N, when you receive N prime 1 plus 1, that's when you start 1 through N. And before that, you do not start that timer. And that way, you're basically, the logic here is you've received N plus 1, now you have the most relevant thing to send, and like things 1 plus N might not be relevant anymore, so you should stop.
Yeah, for a mechanism, I agree that's mostly fun, although we need to make sure we handle the end of track, subscription, etc. case. Otherwise, you end up with one thing that sticks around forever. But yeah. Vincent.
Yeah, for this max cache duration, I think it's more like a content policy. So if it's a content policy, maybe it should be in the control plane of the MOQ. For example, in the subscribe OK, that kind of thing. And for the delivery timeout, I think it's for the real-time use case. So it should be put in the data plane, in the object header or the stream header. So they are kind of different use cases. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that they're different. I want to follow up on this. So, is there a strong consensus among this group as to whether or not we prefer doing this on a subscription granularity or on a stream, basically like how this PR is laid out? Because there's also 448, which I'm not saying that's exactly the text we want, but like that outlines kind of how you might do it in subscribe OK. And so if there's a strong consensus one way or the other, that would be helpful. Alan.
Just to clarify what you're asking, you're saying that time is conveyed in a subscribe okay rather than on a track or an object basis, meaning that all of the groups or streams or objects will all in the track have the same cache duration.
Right. Like,
But it could still be an immutable track property.
sure.
Potentially.
I mean, you could also put it in track, but we don't have putting in subscribe okay. I think given the mechanisms we have is easier than trying to shove it into like the track catalog and stuff like that.
No,
But
I mean, I think it's fine for subscribe okay to convey things that are immutable track properties and not subscription dynamic properties. Like, I don't know, HTTP conveys object length in the response. Like,
yep,
that's basically immutable. Anyway, okay, I think I understand what you're asking.
Okay, do you have a reference, Alan? Or on the mic?
I think I mean, maybe it comes back to, does somebody have a use case for like different stuff, different groups within my track? Like, I definitely, like, the first group definitely should have a like expiration of X, and the second group's gonna have an expiration of Y. I like, so if somebody has that use case, I'd like to hear it. Otherwise, it seems like it's kind of fine to set it and have the whole track obey it. So, I mean, there's also a third all of the above option, which is we like allow you to override it if it's different. I do like the property of, like, datagrams, for example, seem like it would be extremely heavyweight to like include this everywhere instead of just having every datagram in the track expire at the same or cache at the same.
Can you clarify what the proposal would be, Ian, if it was in subscribe okay? What's the expiration relative to? An object lifetime, a group lifetime, can't be a stream lifetime, right?
I think the functionality would be, or my proposal is the functionality would be very similar to what we're talking about here. The difference is that the max cache duration would be communicated once in the subscribe okay, instead of being in, the same value in every single stream header. So,
but it would still be per group or per, it would still follow the delivery mode, the forwarding
right, yeah,
of the stream.
Yep.
The track.
Yeah. So like in Cullen's example, where you have a 500 millisecond jitter buffer or something, and you stuck 500 milliseconds in the subscribe okay, that would say, like, for this entire subscription, no one's going to really want to go back more than 500 milliseconds because that's, my application's jitter buffer, and I know that kind of thing. Cullen, you're up next.
I think one of the things that always cause, the more I think about this, I guess I could see either is possible, but we have times where like every subscription is gone, but it's still in the cache, and then new subscriptions arrive, and you come to questions of like, well, when, I guess that the original publisher would be up to never changing it. It would still need to be part of the data model. You'd have to save this information with the data in the cache. You can't just ignore it in the subscriptions. So I really think that this should follow the data, which logic, and that's how we have in the draft, right? Logically, it's in every data object. Yes, we compress it out of each data object by moving it into the track header as a compression approach, so we don't have to send it in every single one. But logically, it's very tied to that. And I think that makes more sense to me than trying to have that, the subscription's about what you want to receive. And this is not about what you want to receive. This is an attribute of the data that's being cached that can survive beyond the length of the subscriptions. And is not tied to the state of the subscription. It's tied to the state of the object. So I think I prefer to transfer it in the various track headers, this comes down to I guess probably the case that will push us hardest one way or the other will be actually the datagram case, because we'll be discussing whether this, whether do we expand every datagram and add this, or do we have a compression efficiency by, if we put it in the subscribe, now we don't have an every datagram. That's probably the most compelling argument one way or the other. And I realize I just argued against what I was arguing for, but there we go.
Yeah, no, there are trade-offs. I wanted to, at least the way I currently have it written up, the TTL is adjusted if it sits in cache for a while at one hop and then is propagated on.
Right.
Which I think is the behavior we want, but it does create this weird thing where like it's an object property, but it changes. So
Which I'm fine with. I thought that was the right. That seems like the most desirable thing to have is that property. So yeah,
I think so too, but I just want to make sure. Okay, Luke.
Yeah, so I think, just to disagree a little bit with Colin, this is a track property. Like, yeah, it's part of a subscribe okay, but we're just telling you a track property. It'll be in track info. Think of it that way. It's part of the data. It's with track info. It doesn't change. I think it should just go in track info. I think you should just say the maximum number of groups, or the maximum cache size in megabytes, or something, or max, in duration, because this is just, at the end of the day, it's optimization, so I don't waste too much money on caching stuff. For a lot of streams, max groups will be 1. Like the catalog stream, only cache the most recent one. I don't care. Like, I don't need to specify 60 minutes as my, I'll generate a new group after 60 minutes. Just say there's one group, don't cache anything else. So I think just literally putting a max groups in the track info and just telling the CDN to not waste any data on anything larger than that is good enough for me.
From a convenience of mechanism perspective, would it be okay to put in subscribe okay as well, just so?
Oh yeah. They're the same thing to me. They're basically just to avoid you having to do a track info request every time you subscribe, because you need. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a head versus a get. They're both the same headers.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Victor and then Colin.
I do think that it would be very useful if we had some mechanism to specify immutable track global properties, and I think this is one of them. And in my PR originally put it in subscribe okay, but I guess I didn't make it entirely clear that this is what we're trying to accomplish here, and it might be more useful to be explicit. So, the other thing I'm kind of want to understand is more, I think I want to confirm that my mental picture of this use case with long ops is correct. So assume that I have some application, and let's say it cuts a GOP new every minute. And I have a client and TTL set to 1 second. And I join 15 seconds in, and I ask for a current group. So my impression is that what I expect to happen, and correct me if I'm not, it's is that what will happen is I will ask for the current group, but since the TTL for the beginning of the current group expired, what I want the relay to tell me is, okay, I subscribed you to the stream starting with next group, since I don't have the current group from the beginning, and now it's up to you, to your application, to go ask for an iframe. What is also possible, and I would find extremely weird, is if the relay says, okay, I'm starting to use a current group, here are some random p-frames, and I assume this is not what is supposed to happen, and I want to clarify that this is not something that people believe is useful.
Okay. Colin, I don't know if I can answer Victor's question, unfortunately, but.
No, look, Victor. I was going to respond. I'll respond to Victor, and then look. Victor makes. I don't think I don't think anywhere on any of this we're proposing that you would ever not send the things in a group in order in a single stream when you're doing a group per stream or something like that. That you'd have gaps, or that you'd start in the middle of a P frame without starting at the beginning of the group or anything like that. Right? That's not on the table.
Okay, I guess that's one of the thing I found confusing about caching.
Yeah, and look, this all comes back to Mike's comment too, that really we're talking about what gets delivered, not what gets cached in the end, which I agree with. So I was just thinking about what Luke said, this is an immutable property of a track, and I get the point on a bunch of that, and I can see how we could go down that direction. But one use case I want to make sure we don't rule out for the future is being able to have variable size groups in time. So if I was doing a client that wanted to cache, that wanted to be able to make sure it could go back 15 seconds at least and be good with that. So that's the client requirement, is I can go back at least 15 seconds. But instead of just using 15-second GOP sequences, I'm mostly using, maybe 15-second GOP sequences. But sometimes when there's a scene change, I'm going to much shorter GOP sequences or something like that. Like, I think in the future, we're going to have much more variable size GOP sequences than we have today. And I want to make sure we're designed for that future. That doesn't rule out what Luke was proposing. I just think it's a nuance we need to not lose if we do that. So I don't think this timeout is constant for the track. I might be constant for a GOP sequence, but I have not viewed it as a constant value for the track.
I'm going to close the queue soon, so if you want to say something, get in it.
Yeah. I wanted to make a quick comment on Colin's comment, which is I think that's a totally valid statement. If we were going to do the group, number of groups to cache max groups thing, I would think it would be a case where you could do either max groups or cache duration, basically a TTL sort of thing, or like an absolute age or something. Like you could pick the appropriate mechanism, but I'm not sure. So
makes sense.
Yeah. Luke.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Colin. Unfortunately, I don't kind of like these proposals that based on real time, like based on when things arrive, because it doesn't work for VOD. It's weird when things are delivered out of order. I think the way to fix that properly is probably like timestamps. Unfortunately, like in the group header or something, it says like this is the presentation timestamp, and you expire based on the presentation timestamp. Max groups is like a hack because we just don't know how long a group is going to be or how long the group was, in fact. Yeah, and I just want to specify my proposal as well would work the same for every stream mode. You just expire based on groups. So it wouldn't matter if it was a stream per group or stream per object or stream per track. You just have either max groups would be 100 or maybe max group age would be 59 seconds or something, and you just expire based on that.
Just throwing it. I like these things where this expiry of the data does not depend on how it was transported as a desirable property to me if we can get it. Yeah.
Okay. Queue is closed. Mo?
I'd like to go back to what Mike said originally, because I feel like we're not addressing the real use cases, and I don't believe these mechanisms are actually going to be what any publisher or any business contract actually wants. Like Mike said, if you pay for distribution, it's a content distribution network. It's not, cache is almost irrelevant. So if I just want to say, if I put this property as 2 seconds or something, does that mean I prohibit trick play? Does the client interpret that as that you cannot trick play beyond 2 seconds, or just it's not cache, so it's not efficient delivery to multiple subscribers? Talking about everything in terms of cache means it's just inefficient delivery to multiple subscribers. It doesn't say anything about a semantic of you prohibited from receiving the resource. Can you still go all the way back to the origin and get the resource, just not efficiently to multiple subscribers? I think that's really the ultimate thing, is what players care about. They don't know or care about whether or not their neighbor is going to get it fast. They know they care about, am I going to get it, period. So I think we need to think about what is the delivery contract of these fields. Am I prohibited from trick play by receiving this value as a client? Or it's just a hint that your neighbor may get it less efficiently because it's not in cache. He's going to go to the origin too.
Alan.
Yeah, I jumped in. This is maybe Martin had this thought. I don't know, but I feel like what Mo's saying about we need to be driving the mechanisms we add to the protocol based on the use cases we're trying to solve for, but we don't really have the use cases written down anywhere is a problem. And I wonder if maybe Mo or someone else could like take a stab at like writing down, without referencing the word Mach-T or any like bits we've ever specified anywhere, like describe what are the problems that you need Mach-T to solve, or you need like because I've heard like we need to communicate something to the relay based on like contractual obligations or like how we're being billed, which is definitely like maybe that's a use case we really want to solve for. And then there's definitely heard one about there are times when we want to make sure that things don't get delivered because they're too stale. But it would be just great if these things could be like written down. Like, this is the problem we're trying to solve, and we all agree this is the problem we're trying to solve. And then maybe this is the mechanisms will fall out more naturally.
So Ian, we have about 4 minutes left. Have you gleaned him out of this, or is there a concluding question that maybe can give you some clarity?
That's a great question. I think Alan just, blew away my, blew up in my.
All the progress we made today.
Well,
That's okay.
I didn't
mean,
want to blow it up, but I mean, I think what Mo is saying is like, we can design this mechanism. The mechanism may do something, but is it something that we need? Is maybe not, or is it solving what people are actually trying to solve for, or is it like a proxy for solving a problem they're trying to solve?
Sure.
Anyway, if you,
Well,
I'm not saying if you want to land it, go land it. Like we can play with it, and it's not like.
Well, I mean, I don't think Will is here today, but Will is the one I think that articulated this use case about the contractual requirement for like content to go away, right?
I guess I mean, again, I want to find a balance between making some progress on some of these things so we can go play with them and get some actual implementation experience, and also like not just landing stuff that's useless. And so like I think we're constantly trying to tread a good boundary between those two things. And so I guess that's what I would put forward is like, I think there's certainly a few ways forward we could go here that are, fairly implementable. I think like, it's not like we don't know how to implement it or something. And so I think the question becomes like, would putting that in the draft and implementing it be a waste of time because it's just so wrong, or is it like close, but like maybe not exactly what we want? And I guess that's what I put forward. So I don't know. I don't have a good answer, but maybe people can chime in on list or I guess we have 7 minutes left. I don't know. I mean, we could do a poll, I guess. I don't know.
Could do a poll. You want to do a poll?
Sure. I mean, Colin, do you want to add something?
No, I was going to try and speak for Alan and myself since, but never mind. Go for a poll. Perfect.
All right, I will type in a question. I've never done this before as a new chair, so bear with me. So I guess the question I'm asking is this information valuable for a real use case?
I mean, I think it's, would we like to add some sort of max cache duration, whether it's subscribe/track based or in subscribe okay, or this stream based one, like basically sooner rather than later, would be my first question. And my follow-up question would be,
Do we need to jump back into Meet Echo for this poll, or is this a
Yes.
poll?
oh geez, okay. That's okay, I don't need to vote anyway.
I mean, is there a way to do there's probably a way to do a thing in Meet if we wanted to do it in Meet.
There is.
Since people seem to want to do that.
I mean, I think that, well, the Meet Echo ones will be conserved. Like, I think they'll be either preserved in some way. I don't know. I don't really care. It's fine. But I just want to make sure I understand. It sounded, I don't know, Ian, where you just have you had one question?
I want.
It sounded like there were 3 questions mixed in there. Like,
is
this useful? Should we do it?
2 questions. One is, do we want to try to move forward on a proposal, like either the subscribe okay track info style proposal or this max cache duration proposal, either one of them in the near future? Or do we think like we're just so far out in left field that like it's a waste of time? Basically, like should I continue pressing on this now, or should I punt on it for a month or some long period of time and come back up? And then the follow-up question becomes, if the answer is we do want to do something about this in the near future, do people prefer this track info / subscribe okay approach, or the per stream header approach?
Okay, I think there's a poll coming up
It came up
on your screens. So feel free to vote. We'll give this another couple minutes, and then I'm going to have to wrap up. Is anyone failing to find this poll? I imagine there's someone on a cell phone that's probably flailing, but
Can you clarify again? Is this a Meet or Meet Echo poll?
in Meet.
It should pop up automatically, or we have to look for something?
There, in my screen, there's a little like square triangle and a circle in the bottom right corner. And if you click that, and then you get a menu and you click polls, is where I found it.
Got it. Bottom right and then polls.
Thank you for using Meet. I would have never found it in Meetup. I would have never managed to get back in Meet account before the
Yeah, I mean, I just realized that was kind of where we're at. Does anyone need more time? And make sure you're not muted when you say you need more time. Going once, going twice. Poll is concluded. So let the record show that 7 people said, yes, this is valuable, and 3 said this is not valuable. Does someone who thinks it's not valuable want to stand up and very briefly explain why it's not valuable? Or especially if you strongly object to like putting this in.
I said not valuable because I don't believe cache is the problem. I think we're talking about delivery, like Mike said, and I'm not sure how these semantics map onto delivery. Are clients prohibited from requesting a resource, or is it purely a delivery optimization for the efficiency of your peers, not even impacting you, it's impacting the efficiency of your peers?
I have a short answer to the, are you prohibited from requesting? The answer is no. I mean, you can't possibly use this to prohibit a client from making a new subscription for data that's older than this cache duration.
But would the relay forward the subscription, or would the relay block the subscription because of this duration?
It would forward it because the duration, all it does is like nuke it from the cache. And so basically it's going to be a situation, it'll be a cache miss.
Then this makes no sense if we're talking about resource conservation, the cache of one single relay versus the bandwidth of going all the way up and distributing the resource again through the entire relay network. The resource argument doesn't make sense if relays are allowed to do that or required to upstream request it.
Okay, I'm gonna have to cut off this discussion. Ian, do you have? I'll give you 30 seconds for the last word on this issue before we.
Mike, why don't you? Mo, your concern is totally like a good one, and so I do want to make sure it's addressed. But yeah, Mike.
Yeah, really quickly. I also said no. I'm not super strongly opposed, but I do worry a little bit about adding things like features when we haven't addressed kind of the larger conceptual issues like I was getting at, because it seems like the path towards a lot of complexity that we just might need to tear out again later, or we're going to be tripping over as we like get a better idea of how we want to really solve things. Yeah, not super strongly opposed, but I don't think it's necessary. I think we could spend our time in other ways.
Okay, so just a few more administrative notes. Once again, if you're planning to attend the virtual, the in-person virtual in 2 weeks in Seattle, in person. If you're planning to attend in person and I'm not yet in your name's not on the list that I emailed out to the list yesterday, please email MOQ-chairs and let us know when you're going to be, if you're going to come. Thank you to Luke for doing the notes. I invite you all to take a look and make sure he's accurately captured your position. It's always a good thing to do. And also, I should say that Draft 04 is out, and that is going to be interop target for June 17th, that interop. You also need PR 457, which fixes an omitted status code. So you can't implement the message without the correct message type. But other than that, Draft 04 is ready to go, and so that's what we're going to be interoping on the 17th. Alan?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we're working on the draft agenda for the interim, and it's going to be likely focused around priority. But I think if people have like something that there'll probably be a call on the list soon for like, if you have a topic or a presentation or something that you want to share, at least we can't maybe promise you time, but if, there will be an opportunity. So if that will be, look for that coming soon, some material on the list.
And if people have thoughts on issues that, since so many things are interrelated, people have thoughts on things that would like unblock the other things that they want to prioritize, please feel free to reach out to me directly and chat with me and try to figure out like how I can get those in front. Cause I feel like I'm trying to like move forward on like something. But like every time I try to move forward on something, I get blocked by something else. And so like, I'm sure there's like some like step in some direction I can move that would strictly move things forward, but it can be a challenge. So open to advice on that.
All right, we're now 1 minute over. So thank you everyone for attending, and we will see you next week.